The elevator doors slid open with a mechanical whisper, revealing a young woman whose movements would soon captivate and disturb millions around the world. In those final captured moments, 21-year-old Elisa Lam pressed herself against the elevator's back wall, her dark hair falling across her shoulders as she peered cautiously into the hallway beyond. What happened next would transform a tragic personal struggle into one of the most discussed mysteries of the digital age, forever linking her name to the shadowy corridors of downtown Los Angeles's most infamous hotel. On a crisp January morning in 2013, Elisa Lam stepped off a Greyhound bus in Los Angeles, her backpack heavy with dreams and the weight of a journey that had begun in her native Vancouver, Canada. She was a student at the University of British Columbia, a young woman with literary aspirations who documented her thoughts and feelings on a Tumblr blog called Nouvelle Nouveau. In her online writings, she revealed glimpses of a brilliant but troubled mind, someone who wrestled with the complexities of existence while maintaining an infectious curiosity about the world around her. Her posts spoke of sleepless nights, of sleeping away entire days, of the constant battle between light and darkness that defined her daily experience. Lam had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. She had been prescribed several medications for her mental health issues: Wellbutrin, lamotrigine, quetiapine, dexedrine spansul, and venlafaxine. These medications were her lifeline, chemical anchors designed to keep her moods from swinging too wildly between the crushing depths of depression and the dangerous heights of mania. But managing bipolar disorder is never simple, and the young woman who walked through Los Angeles that January carried within her a storm that no medication could completely quiet. Los Angeles stretched before her like a promise written in palm trees and smog, a city where dreams were both born and destroyed with equal measure. She had planned this trip as a solo adventure, a chance to explore the West Coast and visit places like San Diego before returning home. But first, she needed a place to stay in the sprawling metropolis, somewhere affordable for a student traveling on a tight budget. That search led her to a building that had become synonymous with tragedy, desperation, and death: the Cecil Hotel. Built in 1924 during the golden age of Hollywood, the Cecil Hotel had once been a beacon of elegance in downtown Los Angeles. Its ornate facade and grand lobby spoke of an era when the city was still defining itself, when the hotel industry catered to travelers with style and grace. But the decades had not been kind to the Cecil. By the time Elisa Lam checked in on January 28, 2013, the building had transformed into something far darker than its architects had ever intended. The hotel's reputation preceded it like a shadow. Over the years, it had become a magnet for the desperate and the lost, a place where people came when they had nowhere else to go. The building had witnessed more than its share of tragedy, suicides, murders, and mysterious deaths that had earned it the grim nickname of the Hotel Death. Some guests spoke of strange noises in the night, of elevators that moved without being called, of a general sense of unease that seemed to permeate the building's very walls. Yet for budget-conscious travelers like Elisa, the Cecil offered what they needed most: a roof over their heads at a price they could afford. When Elisa first checked into the Cecil, she was assigned to a shared room, but within days, she had requested a transfer to a private room. Hotel records would later show that she had complained about her roommates' behavior, saying they were partying too much and making it difficult for her to rest. This was not unusual behavior for someone managing bipolar disorder, particularly during a manic episode when the need for control and personal space can become overwhelming. The hotel staff accommodated her request, moving her to a single room on one of the upper floors. For the first few days of her stay, Elisa maintained regular contact with her family back in Vancouver. She called her parents daily, sharing stories of her adventures and reassuring them that she was safe. She visited local bookstores, explored the city, and seemed to be enjoying her West Coast adventure. Her social media posts during this time reflected a young woman experiencing the excitement of independent travel, documenting her journey with the enthusiasm typical of someone her age. But as January drew to a close, something began to change. The daily phone calls became less frequent. Her social media activity shifted in tone, becoming more erratic and concerning. Those who knew her well recognized the signs: the rapid shifts in mood, the disconnect from reality, the increasingly disorganized thinking that often preceded a severe manic episode. She was likely in a psychotic state of some kind, which is totally possible with bipolar disorder, says Drain. It's a disconnect from reality because the stimulus in your head is more powerful than the external reality around you. January 31st, 2013 was supposed to be Elisa's checkout date. She had booked her room for 3 nights, intending to continue her journey south to San Diego. But as the sun set that evening, Elisa Lam was nowhere to be found. Her parents, accustomed to her daily calls, became increasingly worried when the phone remained silent. Hours turned into a day, then another, and still no word from their daughter. Finally, consumed by fear and uncertainty, they contacted the Los Angeles Police Department to report Elisa missing. The investigation began immediately, but the Cecil Hotel was not an easy place to conduct a search. The building's layout was complex, with multiple floors, numerous rooms, and a labyrinthine network of corridors, stairwells, and service areas. Hotel staff were questioned, guests were interviewed, and security footage was reviewed, but Elisa seemed to have simply vanished into the building's shadows. It was during this investigation that authorities discovered what would become the most haunting piece of evidence in Elisa Lam's case: the elevator security footage. The grainy, timestamp-marked video showed Elisa's final known movements, captured by the Cecil Hotel security cameras on the evening of January 31st. What the footage revealed was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. In the video, Elisa enters the elevator alone, pressing multiple buttons on the panel. She appears to be talking to someone, but the hallway outside the elevator is empty. Her behavior becomes increasingly erratic as the seconds tick by. She presses herself against the elevator's back wall, peers cautiously around the corner into the hallway, and makes strange hand gestures that seem to be directed at someone or something that isn't visible on camera. Her movements are fluid yet jerky, purposeful yet random, as if she's responding to stimuli that only she can perceive. The elevator doors, which should have closed automatically after a few seconds, remain open throughout most of the encounter. This malfunction added another layer of mystery to an already baffling situation. Some would later claim this was evidence of supernatural interference, while others pointed to it as proof of foul play. The truth, however, was likely far more mundane: a simple mechanical issue or the result of Elisa having pressed multiple buttons in rapid succession, confusing the elevator's operating system. When authorities released this footage to the public as part of their appeal for information, it spread across the internet like wildfire. The video was uploaded to YouTube, shared on social media platforms, and dissected frame by amateur detectives around the world. Theories proliferated like wildfire. Some claimed Elisa was playing a game, others insisted she was hiding from an attacker, and still others believed she was experiencing some form of supernatural encounter. The internet's response to the elevator footage revealed humanity's insatiable appetite for mystery and our tendency to prefer sensational explanations over tragic realities. Chat rooms and forums buzzed with speculation. Some pointed to supposed similarities between Elisa's case and the plot of a Japanese horror film called Dark Water, where a girl drowns in a building's water tank. Others noted that a tuberculosis test called Elisa shared her name, leading to wild theories about government conspiracies and biological warfare. But while the world debated the meaning of her final recorded moments, Elisa Lam remained missing. The search continued, expanding to include the hotel's roof, basement, and service areas. Police brought in specialized equipment and search dogs, but the building seemed to have swallowed her without a trace. Meanwhile, guests at the Cecil Hotel began complaining about problems with the water supply. The pressure was low, the color was off, and some reported a strange taste that made the water unpalatable. Maintenance staff initially attributed these issues to the aging building's plumbing system, but as complaints persisted, they decided to investigate further. On February 19, 2013, nearly 3 weeks after Elisa had vanished, a hotel maintenance worker climbed onto the Cecil's roof to inspect the water tanks. The building's water supply came from 4 large black tanks positioned on the roof, each one tall enough to require a ladder to reach the top. After numerous hotel guests had complained of low water pressure, a hotel maintenance worker went to check on the water tanks on the roof. That's when he made the grisly discovery of Lam's body. What the maintenance worker found in one of those tanks would haunt him for the rest of his life. Floating face up in the dark water was the body of Elisa Lam, naked and in an advanced state of decomposition. The young woman who had disappeared into the Cecil's labyrinthine interior had been above their heads all along, her body contaminating the water supply that flowed through the building's pipes and into guests' glasses, showers, and sinks. The discovery sent shockwaves through the hotel and the broader Los Angeles community. How had a young woman ended up in a water tank on the hotel's roof? How had she accessed the roof in the first place? Why was she found naked? And perhaps most disturbing of all, how long had hotel guests been drinking and bathing in water that had been contaminated by her decomposing body? The coroner's investigation that followed painted a picture that was both tragic and complex. On February 19, 2013, the body of Canadian tourist Elisa Lam, born as Lam Hoi, Chinese, was recovered from a large cistern atop the Stay on Main Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, where she had been a guest. The autopsy revealed that Elisa had drowned, but determining exactly how she had ended up in the tank proved more challenging. Toxicology tests showed that while Elisa had been prescribed multiple medications for her bipolar disorder and depression, revealed only traces of the medications prescribed to treat bipolar disorder, including antidepressants, a mood stabilizer, and an antipsychotic. This finding was significant because it suggested that Elisa had not been taking her medications as prescribed in the days leading up to her death. For someone with bipolar disorder, medication noncompliance can trigger severe manic episodes characterized by psychosis, poor judgment, and dangerous behavior. The physical evidence told its own story. To reach the water tanks, Elisa would have had to access the hotel's roof, climb a ladder, and remove the heavy lid of the tank before somehow entering the water. The roof access was supposed to be secured, but like many aspects of the aging Cecil Hotel, security was inconsistent. The tank lid was heavy enough to require significant effort to move, but not impossible for a determined individual. Most puzzling was the question of how Elisa had ended up naked in the tank. Her clothes were found floating nearby, along with her hotel key card and personal belongings. This detail fueled speculation about foul play, but the coroner found no evidence of trauma or sexual assault. The most likely explanation was that Elisa had removed her clothes herself, possibly due to the disorientation and poor judgment associated with a severe manic episode. The coroner ultimately ruled Elisa's death an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant would have made escape nearly impossible once someone was inside. But this official explanation did little to quiet the internet's appetite for more sensational theories. The case had already taken on a life of its own online, spawning countless YouTube videos, blog posts, and forum discussions that refused to accept the simple tragedy of a young woman's mental health crisis. Some claimed she had been murdered and her body placed in the tank to cover up the crime. Others insisted that supernatural forces were at work, pointing to the Cecil Hotel's reputation for ghostly encounters and unexplained phenomena. The truth about Elisa Lam's death was actually far more common and heartbreaking than any conspiracy theory. She was a young woman struggling with a serious mental illness, traveling alone far from her support system, who experienced a severe psychiatric episode that cost her life. Her story was not unique in its medical aspects. Countless individuals with bipolar disorder face similar challenges with medication compliance and the risk of dangerous behavior during manic episodes. What made her case extraordinary was the way it intersected with our digital age's hunger for mystery and the internet's ability to transform personal tragedy into public spectacle. The Cecil Hotel itself became a character in the story that grew around Elisa's death. The building's dark history was excavated and sensationalized, with media outlets and amateur investigators highlighting every suicide, murder, and mysterious death that had occurred within its walls. The hotel was portrayed as cursed, haunted, or somehow inherently evil, when in reality it was simply a place where vulnerable people often ended up: the homeless, the mentally ill, the desperate, and those who had nowhere else to go. For Elisa's family, the internet's obsession with their daughter's death was both a blessing and a curse. The widespread attention had helped publicize her disappearance, potentially aiding in the search effort, but it also transformed their private grief into a public spectacle. They were forced to watch as their daughter's final moments were dissected, analyzed, and sensationalized by strangers who had never known her as anything more than a grainy figure in an elevator video. The case also highlighted the stigma and misunderstanding that still surrounds mental illness. Rather than acknowledging the tragedy of a young woman who died because she couldn't get the help she needed during a psychiatric crisis, much of the public discussion focused on supernatural explanations or criminal conspiracies. This tendency to seek extraordinary explanations for the consequences of mental illness reflects our society's continued discomfort with the realities of conditions like bipolar disorder. Elisa herself frequently referenced the difficulties of living with bipolar disorder in her Tumblr blog, Nouvelle Nouveau. In her own words, she had documented the daily struggle of managing her condition, the exhaustion of fighting her own mind, and the challenge of maintaining relationships and responsibilities while battling the extremes of mood that defined her experience. Her blog posts revealed a thoughtful, creative young woman who was acutely aware of her condition and working hard to manage it. In one particularly poignant post, she wrote about the challenge of explaining her illness to others, noting how difficult it was for people to understand something they couldn't see or experience themselves. She described the isolation that often accompanies mental illness, the way it can make you feel disconnected from the world around you even when you're surrounded by people. These insights into her internal experience make her death all the more tragic. Here was someone who understood her condition, who was working to manage it, but who ultimately fell victim to the unpredictable nature of severe mental illness. The aftermath of Elisa's death also raised questions about the responsibilities of hotels and other businesses that serve vulnerable populations. The Cecil Hotel's security measures were clearly inadequate. A guest should not have been able to access the roof and water tanks without triggering some form of alarm or intervention. The building's management claimed they were not aware of Elisa's mental health status, but critics argued that the hotel had a duty to monitor guests' safety regardless of their medical history. Years later, the case was featured in Netflix's Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, a documentary series that attempted to provide a comprehensive look at the circumstances surrounding Elisa's death. While the series did make an effort to focus on the mental health aspects of the case, it also indulged in some of the more sensational theories that had surrounded the story, arguably perpetuating the very phenomenon it claimed to examine critically. The documentary sparked renewed interest in the case, but also criticism from mental health advocates who felt it continued to sensationalize a tragedy that should have been treated with more sensitivity. They argued that the series focused too much on the mystery and conspiracy theories surrounding Elisa's death and not enough on the systemic issues that contribute to tragedies like hers: inadequate mental health resources, the stigma surrounding mental illness, and the challenges faced by individuals managing serious psychiatric conditions without adequate support. Today, more than a decade after Elisa Lam's death, her case continues to be discussed and debated online. New videos analyzing the elevator footage appear regularly on YouTube, each promising to reveal some previously overlooked detail or present a new theory about what really happened. The Cecil Hotel, now operating under different management and a new name, has tried to distance itself from its troubled past. But Elisa's story remains inextricably linked to the building where she spent her final days. For those who study true crime and the internet's role in shaping public perception of tragedy, Elisa Lam's case serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of treating real-life tragedies as entertainment. Her death was not a puzzle to be solved or a mystery to be unraveled for the amusement of online audiences. It was the end of a young life, a devastating loss for her family and friends, and a stark reminder of the challenges faced by millions of people living with mental illness. The real mystery in Elisa Lam's case is not how she ended up in that water tank. The evidence strongly supports the conclusion that she climbed in during a severe manic episode and was unable to get out. The real mystery is why we, as a society, remain so uncomfortable with the realities of mental illness that we prefer to believe in supernatural explanations or criminal conspiracies rather than acknowledge the tragic consequences of inadequate mental health care and support. Elisa Lam was more than the sum of her final moments. She was a student, a writer, a daughter who was loved by her family and friends. She had dreams and aspirations, fears and hopes, just like any other young person her age. Her death was not mysterious or supernatural. It was the predictable and preventable result of a serious mental illness that she was struggling to manage while far from her support system. In the end, perhaps the most fitting memorial to Elisa Lam would be a renewed commitment to supporting individuals with mental illness, reducing the stigma that surrounds these conditions, and ensuring that people in crisis have access to the help they need. Her death should serve as a reminder that behind every true crime story is a real person whose life had value beyond the circumstances of their death. And maybe, just maybe, if we can remember that, we can prevent other families from experiencing the kind of loss that Elisa's parents endured when their daughter disappeared into the shadows of the Cecil Hotel and never came home.